Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks so much for joining today. We are joined by two longtime members of GRADE and the US GRADE Network. We have Perry Davitkov. He is a hepatologist at the Cleveland VA Medical Center and an associate professor of medicine at Case Western Reserve University. This is where he also completed his medical training. His clinical and research interests focus on hepatocellular carcinoma screening and prevention. In addition to his clinical and academic roles, Dr. Davitkov has served as a grade methodologist for the past decade. He has advanced from a trainee to a senior methodologist over the last 3 years. He's worked extensively with the American Gastroenterological Association and has also contributed to guideline development for organizations such as the Infectious Diseases Society of America and the American Association for the Study of Liver Diseases. So welcome, Perry. In addition, Dr. Osama Altayar is an associate professor of medicine at Washington University in St. Louis. His clinical and research interests focus on celiac disease, knowledge synthesis, and implementation science. He is the current chair for the American Gastroenterological Institute Clinical Guidelines Committee, and he's a member of the GRADE Working Group and has served as a methodologist in the development of guidelines for the American Gastroenterological Association and the Infectious Diseases Society of America. So thank you so much, Perry and Osama, for joining us today, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for the lovely introduction. I'm gonna try to share my slides. Let's see. Is it good? Can you all see the shared slides well?
Looks
Looks
great.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you again for having us both this morning. I will start with no disclosure. Both of us has no financial disclosure, and we are both members of the GRADE Working Group. So this morning we are talking about existing evidence summaries, systematic reviews, why using them, what are the benefits, pitfalls, and how to find them, how to critically appraise them, and how to use these existing evidence summaries. So part of the why we do, a big reason of why we do systematic review and meta-analysis is to provide evidence base that informs the guideline development process. We're going to be discussing the systematic conduction of systematic review and meta-analysis updates and using the existing evidence in context of the guideline process today. So this is the flow of conducting a systematic review. I just briefly gonna go through the process. We first start with formulating the PICO question, then we're gonna design a search strategy, search for available data, and that develop eligibility criteria, what studies gonna be selected and abstract data from, assess for risk of bias or critically appraise these studies. We're going to meta-analyze the available and conducted data, assess and explore for heterogeneity, assess for certainty of the evidence of the outcome, and then interpret the results, draw conclusions, or make recommendation in the guideline world. So this process, it's timely. So we kind of try to guesstimate with Osama, and we worked through a lot of this systematic conduction of systematic reviews, and we be part of a lot of guideline panels. And this depends on the team. So that's why the wide range of time. It can go from 1 to 6 weeks on the process of PICO question and outcome selection, 1 to 2 weeks for designing search strategy and developing eligibility criteria, up to 12 weeks to select the studies. This is the title and abstract and a full text screening, and then abstracting data. It can also take as much time. So slightly shorter for assessing risk of bias, 1 to 2, 3, 4 weeks, and also the meta-analysis, the heterogeneity exploration, certainty of evidence decision, and can go anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks, and then interpreting the results and drawing conclusion can be 2 to 6 weeks. And then absolutely depends on your team and how involved and how fast. So basically it can go from 2 to 3 months up to a year process. And that, imagine, it's only for one PICO. If you have more PICOs, and you're gonna have if you're developing a guideline, you have more PICOs, that's gonna be very timely. And in addition to that, actually, if you think about that, probably they're gonna be a published systematic review. There is this study in 2018 that they were evaluating how many systematic reviews are published yearly. And then in 2014 or 15, there were about 25,000 systematic reviews, which is more than publishing the original studies. So then if you look into it, they're probably going to be a systematic review or evidence already published. And why you should be thinking about maybe using this existing evidence summary, using these systematic reviews. So I'm going to go through the benefits. There are few benefits that we use for the already published systematic reviews, and Osama going to take us through the pitfalls of using systematic review, already published systematic reviews. So first, it's going to be efficiency and the speed. Of course, it's the time. I show you that time list, and they're gonna, if you identify a systematic review that's already done, it's going to save you so much time. It's going to be effort and resources. So then you can focus on the other PICO questions in your guideline that might not have published systematic review. Also, it's going to be quicker time around. So even if you find existing summary, you might just be updating it. It's going to be quick turnaround. Resource savings. So you're going to have lower costs. You look fewer staff hours if your guideline members are helping you that needed for protocol development, also screening and data extraction. That's the bulk of the time that we spend when conducting systematic reviews. So then reduce environmental impact, less printing, data storage, and that administrative overhead as well. So this, the third benefit, if you will, it's important if we are updating an existing review, and that's a continuity and credibility. So if you think there is a consistency of a method, so you find a systematic review, you look at the methodology, and then you use the same core methodology. If it was a well-done methodology, you use the same core methodology that will help you preserve comparability of the findings over time. And also it's recognize the evidence base. So clinicians, policymaker, guideline developers may already are familiar with published earlier, well-done review. So then you're updating, you're using the same methodology, and that's going to build in trust and visibility as well. Relevance and timeliness, it's going to keep the evidence current. It's very important for the rapidly developed topics, and when updating ensures that the practice guidelines remains for the based on the latest available data. And also in the living guidelines, it's going to be facilitated that living guideline recommendation without redoing the whole process. So that's another benefit. Lastly, it's a better use of the existing data. So you can reuse the data that was already extracted. You can reuse the risk of bias assessment, summary tables, the meta-analysis, and just adjust for new evidence. Also, the original review may have some unavailable data. They might done some analysis on individual patient data or acquired authors. So you might be able to use that it's not going to be available in the robust data. So if you end up not reusing the extracted data, you can still identifying the systematic review can be still of a benefit for a cross-referencing the studies that enter in that systematic review. Also is going to provide your clear baseline of assessing a trends or shifts in the effect estimates. And also you can anticipate any methodological issues that might arise, and then you can plan how to handle those. So those are the few benefits that may come up if you end up deciding to use a systematic review that are already published and available. And timeliness, I'm gonna say it's one of the bigger or most advantageous part of that. So I'm gonna stop sharing now for a second, and I'm gonna have Osama go through the pitfalls, and we're gonna be taking questions in the end.
You're muted, Osama.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you can see my screen well? All good? Yep. Okay. So thank you, Perry. Thank you, Madeline, for the introduction as well. And thank you for having me also. So for the pitfalls, Perry was talking about timeliness and how much time you could save. I'm gonna say here, this may, backfire too. Because this may add more effort. Let's say you have multiple evidence summaries, you identify multiple systematic reviews, and you start looking at them one at a time, and you do like, we'll show you the process of identifying prior evidence, but let's say you are looking at each one of them, evaluating how to decide which one to use and all this, you may end up wasting more time and maybe not using anything ultimately. So this may not be recent enough, may not be relevant enough, may not have an acceptable quality, and then you already invested all this time and not use anything. Let's say that prior systematic review or evidence, summary that you identified had some errors in it. And then you go and use it, you're going to propagate the error, right? Let's say they had a problem with the selection of the studies and they excluded some studies that you would have not excluded. Or like as they were doing their data abstraction, they missed a few things. Or as they were doing data abstraction, they made an error in the numbers, for example, or the analysis methods were, inaccurate, or they had some errors again as they're transforming the numbers or moving the numbers from the data abstraction to the analysis. That error that happened, if you don't pick on it, you're going to propagate it and make it, spread it more through your guidelines. One thing that could be perceived is that, the panel, like if you're doing this as a guideline or as a technical review for a guideline or, requesting company, they may receive the lack of effort, right? We assigned you, we contracted you to do this evidence summary for us, and instead of doing the work, you just went and identified a prior one and gave us the same work that has been already published, which may impact your credibility, right? So they say, well, why didn't they perform their due diligence, on this? Why didn't they do their they didn't do the whole work? That's why we contracted with them. There may be an issue with transparency. Let's say that the existing summary did not provide enough detail, right? They did not provide some of the details that, some readers may be interested in and you missed it or they missed it, right? Or for you even like, oh no, they didn't report this. You may end up doing more work as you try to identify things. And then there's risk of reviewer bias, right? Assuming that you have multiple summaries and they're showing contradicting results. Why did you select this review over the other, right? Maybe they're all of good methodological quality. So how do you mitigate this when there are multiple available summaries or reviews? We're going to take you over the steps, that you can, that help you use this process of using existing summaries. And also try to mitigate those risks and pitfalls that we talked about. So we're going to talk first about locating the published systematic reviews, evaluating their relevance, assessing their methodological quality, and finally decide how to use them. And I'm going to hand it back to Perry here.
Okay. Very good. I will quickly reshare my screen. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. Yes, so we did discuss about the benefits and the pitfalls, so I hope I get you at least intrigued that there are enough benefits for you to start wanting to utilize existing evidence. So now let's see how we're going to do that. So we need to locate it first. We need to locate the published systematic reviews. Then we need to see if it's going to be relevant for our use. And then even if that's existent and it's relevant, it still doesn't mean it's well done. So then we need to assess for quality of the systematic review. And then we can have our final decision if we decide to use it, partially use it, or update it, or just use it for cross-referencing. How do we locate it? So we need an umbrella search or review. And then for that, we need to choose the right database. So what's going to be a right database for you? I list a few databases and what might be some advantages if you use them. PubMed or Medline. The advantage it is they have already built-in systematic review filter, so you can do your search, apply the systematic review filter, and you have your search. Cochrane Library, it's your gold standard of systematic review. Embase, it's strong on drug and clinical trials. Web of Science, it's intradisciplinary and it's going to be good for the citation tracking. Epistemonicos, it's also dedicated to systematic reviews and it's free. And Prospero, you can find protocols published about the systematic reviews. So once you decide on your where you're going to search for your umbrella, where you're going to do your umbrella search, then you do your targeted search strategy. You use your PICO, population intervention comparison outcome, then you combine your keywords and bulletin options, and then use a mesh terms for consistency, and then you apply your filter. So PubMed uses systematic review filter, Embase Web of Science. You need to select review or meta-analysis, and that's going to be your filter. Once that's done, you cross-reference the lists and citations just to be sure that your search was well done. And then you go into the selection process. I'm going to give you a quick tip. It's always good to look in a Cochrane library for a high quality of systematic reviews. So start there, and then that's going to save you time and avoid low quality or duplicate reviews. If you identify one in a Cochrane library, then that's probably your best systematic review and you're set to go. Then once you create your list, let's say you don't have your Cochrane, then you have your list of multiple systematic reviews. So you need to assess now for a relevance. So is that or which systematic review is going to be relevant to your PICO questions, what you're trying to answer. So you just review at the method sections, and then you see what type of population, what intervention, what comparison they use, what are the outcomes that they involve. You're all going to find them there, and then you're going to see if they're relevant to your question. If they're not relevant, you're going to exclude. In this situation, you can still use it for cross-referencing so the studies to see what they did with methodology and to see what are the trends. However, you're not going to be able to use the results. If it's partially relevant, let's say you have like some outcomes there, you can use it for cross-referencing, or if you can update it for some newer studies or use it partially for some elements of that systematic review. If it's fully relevant, then you just evaluate it methodologically for use, and that optimally you should be doing it in a duplicates, just because to reduce reviewer bias, and then evaluate for timeliness. If outdated, you can still use the search, use the studies, and just update the review. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing again. I'm going to have Osama discuss the methodological quality, how you assess if that systematic review was done well, and go from there.
Thank you, Perry. So as Perry took us over, we talked about how to find the reviews and then how to screen them kind of and see if they're relevant to us or not. Now that you've identified one, two, or more, or only one review, let's say, or more, you want to know, like, is this a good review to use or not? Is this a highly, like, from quality standpoint and methodological quality standpoint, is this good enough to use for you or not? There are different tools, the tool that is used to assess the methodological quality is the MSTAR 2. And this is focusing on evaluating the quality of the review process, not the included studies. Other tools that can be used is, when you're looking at the reporting, the Prisma, and the Prisma P is more for the protocols of the review. And Perry mentioned earlier Prospero, which is a registry for systematic review protocols. If you want to see, like, did they plan to do something and not do it, or did they do things outside the protocol, which you will see is part of the MSTAR tool. So the MSTAR 2, it's MSTAR 2 because there was an older version. It's a 16 items tool compared to 11 with the original one. It has simpler response categories. We'll go over some of them. It includes a comprehensive user guide, so when you use it, it's very easy to use, and we'll show you that. The overall rating is based on weakness in critical domains. It is not intended to generate an overall score like many of the risk of bias tools that we currently use. And it should assist you in identifying high quality systematic reviews that includes randomized or non-randomized studies. So I'll go over some of the questions and then I'll show you how it looks like on the MSTAR tool. So the first question in the MSTAR tool is if the research question and inclusion criteria included components of your PICO. And this is kind of going again, when you're reviewing the systematic review and looking at the PICO and deciding if it's relevant to you or not, this is kind of the same question, but it's just making sure that everything was listed there. Did the report of the review contain explicit statement that the review methods were established a priori to the conduct of the reviews? And that's where we talked about earlier about the protocol and the Prospero, and you can try to find that. Or sometimes, for the Cochrane reviews, for example, they publish the protocols before. And if they made any deviations, did they report and justify why they did those deviations? Did the authors explain their selection of the study designs for the inclusion in the review? Why did they select this study design? And this is also relevant to you as you're thinking about your evidence. Did the review authors use a comprehensive literature search? So I will show you later in the tool, but examples of things mentioned is how many databases they use. Did they restrict their search based on language? Did they justify such things? Did they look at registries? Did they look at great literature? Did they finish the review within less than 24 months? They have this number of 24 months of the end of the search. So these are some of the criteria you look at. Some of the answers, it's usually a yes, no, and sometimes there's a partial yes. So for example, if they met some of these things, it will be a partial yes. If they met all of them, it will be a yes. Did the review authors perform study selection in duplicate? Did they review, or it was done by a single individual? Did they do the data extraction in duplicate? As you know, if you've done systematic reviews before, that when done by one person and we go like over discordance, you frequently find errors and things being missed here and there, and that's just because of the nature of the process. Did the review authors provide a list of excluded studies? That's one. Two, and justify the exclusion. So I told you about a yes and a partial yes. For example, if they provide a list of the excluded studies, it's a partial yes. If they provide the justification, it becomes a yes. Excuse me. Did the review authors describe the included studies in adequate details? So another one here. If they describe the studies, it's a partial yes. If they provide adequate detail, then it's a full yes. Did the review authors use a satisfactory technique for assessing risk of bias for the study design, right? So depending on the study design, you might want to use a certain tool or another. And the question here is just, is this satisfactory technique or not? Did the review authors report the sources of funding for the studies? Did they look for the source of funding for each study and report it? If meta-analysis was performed, did they use appropriate methods for statistical combination or pooling? Again, they give you also guidance, and I'll show you that on how to look for each one of them. If meta-analysis was performed, did the review authors assess the potential impact of risk of bias in individual studies on the results? So did they look how the risk of bias or the potential risk of bias in each study impacted the results? Did they account for risk of bias when interpreting and discussing the results? So when they discuss the results and report them, did they account for that? Did they provide a satisfactory explanation for and discussion of any heterogeneity? So if there's heterogeneity, did they try to explain it? Did they try to evaluate for it? And if they performed quantitative synthesis, did they carry out an adequate investigation of publication bias? So did they look for publication bias, the small study bias, and discuss its impact on the results? And finally, did they report any potential source of conflict of interest within the people who conducted within the authors or within the people who conducted the systematic review or evidence summary? As you can see, this goes all over the steps that Perry mentioned at the beginning, each step of them and how and if there are any issues with it. And you can see this is the questionnaire and how it looks like. You can see like the first question, it gives you for a yes, what to say, like what to look like. If they reported all the following, then it's a yes. You can see this is a question on the explicit statement that the review methods were established prior to the presence of a protocol, essentially. And they tell you what is a partial yes and what is a yes. For example, I think a partial yes is that the report it existed, and a full yes is like they give much details about the process and even like a published protocol and provide any justification for deviations. The same for the selection of the design. And this is like a yes and no. And here, like partial yes and yes, this is for the literature search. So you can see like if they search at least 2 databases, provided keywords justify publication restrictions. If you want to do a full yes, you will need to have all the following. So they give you a detailed list of everything. And then if you have all that met, then you can say it's a yes. Now, ultimately, we have all these domains, and you want to decide how this may impact your decision on utilizing the evidence summary for the purpose that you're using it for. So if you're developing a guideline or something, you want to look at each domain and how does it impact your decision. Now, this is again optimally also done in duplicate, right? Because I may look at something Perica and I may judge it. Now, the method is pretty good. The AMSAR is really good at reducing that issue, but it's optimally done in duplicate. Depending on the quality of the review, you may decide to use the review completely or partially. Then, as I mentioned. So, for example, if you have no issues and this is like relevant, completely relevant to you, and there are no methodological quality issues that you're concerned about, and the answers all the questions that you're looking for, you can just use the whole summarized evidence without any modifications. You can also, let's say it's really good, everything is fine with you, but you're like, oh, why didn't they do subgroup analysis on this? I need to do some sensitivity analyses. You can still use it, but perform those additional analyses. And the assumption here is that all the detail that you need is provided in the original review. Maybe you have only issues with the analysis, right? So everything was done well, you think, but then the analysis, like, I would have done it differently, right? Or I think this is inaccurate or inappropriate. Then you can just redo the quantitative analysis. There are issues with the analysis. Let's say that there's only issue, like everything is fine, and there are only issues like you disagree with the tool that they use for risk of bias, for example, and you think a different tool is better for your purpose. Then you can redo the risk of bias assessment only. As you see here, we're like going, redoing more and redoing more over time. We get to the data abstraction, like, oh, they didn't provide enough detail. Now, at this point, I start questioning, should I use this in the first place or not, right? If they didn't provide enough detail. But let's say you're like, well, I think everything is fine, but I need more detail on this study. You can also just, abstract the additional data that you want without redoing everything. Let's say everything is fine, but the search is old, right? It was done 5 years ago and you're working now. You can update the search only, use their search strategy as is, and just update it to 1 year prior to the end of the date of their search. So let's say they finished at January 1st, 2015. You start your search from January 1st, 2014. Let's say, you have concerns, numerous concerns about this, and you've already invested the effort in this, right? I told you earlier that this may be more effort and time wasted, but let's say you did that, you can still use it and only use it for cross-referencing, right? So Perry mentioned to us earlier that you can use this just to get references and make sure that you were comprehensive enough in your evaluation. And the last option is, unfortunately, you don't use it at all. If like the quality issues or any of those steps, you don't use it at all. There's this article from ARC, I think 2009, that gives you this summary kind of. It's like you do your search first. Did you identify reviews or not? If you're not, then you're going to have to do your de novo, synthesis or de novo, systematic review. And then if you identify, you assess the relevance. If it's irrelevant, again, you don't need to spend time on this. Just go back. If it's relevant, you have to decide, is it partially relevant or fully relevant? If it's partially, you might use the references, you might use some of it only, but you still have to do your de novo methods. If it's relevant and fully relevant, you're going to assess the quality. And you'll see, well, does it meet all your quality measures or not? If not, then you might use some of it only, as we mentioned. Or if it meets all the quality, domains, you use it. And then you decide how to use it once it meets all those qualities. Do you use the whole thing? Do you need to do other? Does this cover one of your PICO question and saves you time? As we mentioned, the process could take 12 to weeks to a year. Maybe this will help you save 3 months of your work, right? Or you just part of it, or you just use the whole thing even for the purpose. That's it. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Perry and Osama, for a wonderful review of how to utilize existing evidence and all the steps to take. Yeah, so you can feel free to just unmute and ask a question, or if you want to put a question in the chat, you can do that as well.
And while we're waiting for questions, I'm going to say that I do use the already published systematic reviews, or at least always search for them in my guideline work. So we have depends on the guideline, 7 to 10 because you always start. And out of that, I must say, like, at the most, I do 1 to 2 de novo systematic searches. So I am able to identify already published systematic review in like 70 to 80% of the time. And most of the time it's partially used because we are not that lucky to have something published, include all of your outcomes, include everything what you need to just all the analyses are there. It's almost never happens, but that partial use, it's very helpful. It saves like months of like title and abstract screening, full text screening, even double checking. It can be used also as that security step to double check the data extraction, what they've done, how they extracted, and what you are doing. So
does it mean that great presentation, by the way. We need more of this. We need to continue this. This is a great it's a great series to explore how we can provide high quality systematic reviews for our guidelines when we don't have hundreds and thousands of dollars available. So does it also mean that you structure your initial search a little bit differently, meaning that you're going to split things out, just starting out with systematic review, then maybe go for RCTs, then maybe go for non-randomized studies, that you have a little bit of a sort of a development of a process that can already guide you how much time do you have to spend on this, rather than having one big thing, one big search string, then go through everything initially and then sort it out by type. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely great question. And you partially answer it though, like by the steps, and exactly do that. I would start as an umbrella review or an umbrella search to look for systematic reviews first. And that's the very first thing. Like I want to get familiarized with the questions, because not oftentimes that I'm on guidelines that I'm clinical expert on. So that's helped me to see what's out there and then create that search. And if I find like a good systematic review, then we're perfect. If there is not, then I go the stepwise, look for my randomized control trials. And if that's not available, then that big search that we create.
I've done this in multiple different ways. Sometimes I know there are like probably some systematic reviews, and I start with searching for reviews at the beginning, like design my search to focus on the reviews, and that will give you like 100, 200 hits or something, which is easy to go through, like abstract title. Um, Sometimes we do the full search, and as we're doing the abstract title screening, I would tell the team, if you identify any systematic review, just flag it so that we can look at them. So we just do the entire search with the librarian. This way I reduce the use of my librarian essentially. So I use them once. I say, please add a filter for systematic reviews as well in this. And sometimes I tell them to give me the results separately. So give me the results for the systematic reviews filter separately and the RCTs separately, for example. This way, if I want to go through the systematic reviews alone, I can go through them alone. If I want to go through the RCTs alone, I would go through the RCTs.
Right. Perfect. So quick question, then you talk about systematic review filter. Which filter are you referring to?
So the search filter for the librarians, when they do the
Yeah. Do you use a canned one? Do you use the one from McMaster? I think there's a canned one under clinical queries, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. So usually,
Okay.
a librarian, it depends if you have librarian or not. But if you don't have librarians, the McMaster website has different tools for each search type if you're looking for RCTs or systematic reviews.
All right. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'm just going to continue asking you questions. All right. So let's say you have a great, wonderful systematic review. How much do you formally assess the quality, right? And it's a tricky one because obviously, the tools are somewhat difficult to apply because many of them are a reporting standard, which is not the same as a quality standard. Um, there's one, I think, a newer one is Robus, which is supposed to be a quality standard. Um, and I've used it in the past. I think it's sometimes useful. The question is, how much should we actually provide to the audience when we have decided that we're not going to update it? We're going to just take it like it is. It was just brand new, just came out. We're going to take the point estimates, put it in our evidence profile. How much should we provide to the reader a kind of an indication how well we think that systematic review was done, and how do you do it from a practical perspective?
I mean, if, as you were saying, if we are deciding to use that systematic review and we need to completely appraise it, I feel like there needs to be a detailed appraise, because we are now need to know how much confidence we have in their analysis and stuff, and we need to know before we decide to use it completely. Let's say you're right. Let's say and that's how I start my search in a title and abstract. I have my systematic review search done. There are a few hundred title and abstracts, and I start from the oldest, and then I select by year of publication, and I go down. And then there are a few of them, maybe if I'm lucky, like probably 2 or 3 to up to 5. And then I go through full text on all of them. And then now I have an idea that the one might be really good. But then and I'm seeing it's recently published and everything is there, then I would use the MSTAR tool to know each domain that is satisfactory before I use it completely. So I would provide, if I'm not conducting or updating or doing anything to update that systematic review, I will provide the details of appraisal.
We have a question here from the audience. If you use a systematic review along with some newer studies, do you need to re-synthesize the data together, or can you present those point estimates separately? What's the best practice here?
I would resynthesize. I would the purpose of using that, systematic review then is kind of partially, informing you now because you need to update the search and you're adding new studies. I would resynthesize the results here because usually in the context of guidelines, we're trying to look the entirety of evidence. And if you present it separately, it's not very helpful. You separated the evidence here.
Right. So it would be much easier to actually create a great evidence profile where you would have to have one estimate as well possible. So from a practical perspective, how would you do that? Would you rely on that data extraction? I.e., would you just take the numerator denominator, hack it into RevMan or whatever your choice of programs nowadays, and then but your studies that you added, you're going to do a full assessment. How are you doing this?
I'll say how I do it usually. And I personally, what I would do is I usually, even if I include a prior systematic review, one of the things that I check frequently is the numbers again. I consider myself a third review. So I tend to check the numbers, go back to the original studies and check the numbers. So that will be added here. So I'm checking the numbers and I'll add my newer studies and, redo the analysis.
And do you recheck your, Cochrane risk of bias too, or your Robbins?
So that's another question, right? How much do you want to recheck, right?
Right.
It depends. It depends. If I have
Yeah.
if I feel like everything is like everything is like high quality, there are no methodological concerns or something, and I'm concerned about the process that, is it possible that everything is, great? I may question that and I start reviewing things. Yeah.
So you start thinking.
Yeah, I may, yeah. I mean, but again, it's still, if you want to think about it, you saved yourself some time still. That's
Right.
it's like, partially using it, kind of. But you also fall into the trap or the pitfall that we're talking about is that this may be more work sometimes. This may be more work sometimes.
Yeah, you think it's easier to just like use it all together. No, it's not easier. It's actually more time and harder than like just present two separate things, but we cannot present them separately.
Yeah.
It's not the right thing to do. I mean, then then you decrease the amount of studies, decrease the power and everything, the precision. But yeah, I absolutely agree. It saves time. It saves times, but I redo, and you don't need to do it in duplicate though. If it's published, if the numbers are good, you are the one that actually doing it the second or the third time comparing. So you double check the numbers for sure. While you're having them, you pull the studies, and instead of going through hundreds of studies, you go hopefully through a dozen or half a dozen studies, and then you double check the numbers. You pull them into your Excel file and add the new studies. And while you were reading the new studies, because you're assessing for risk of bias, you already know what you're looking for or what the issues might be. So while you're at the studies and you're checking the numbers, you briefly read through the methods and you notice some issues. You can just double check the risk of bias while you're there. And I usually do that while reading. In the back of my head, I think how well it's done or if there are any issues with that. Still saves a tremendous amount of time. I mean, yeah, you can end up like redoing everything. But if you don't trust the search, that's a big point. If you don't trust their search and if you think their studies missing, that's a big point. Then it's I would just say don't even use it for cross-referencing only. Don't use it, don't update it. If it's the search and it's easy to see how the search is done. quickly, it should be published. That's the first thing. It should be published in a supplement. You go through the search. If you trust the search, then it's gonna save you time.
I have to say, I also do something sometimes. I haven't been lucky enough to be able to use prior reviews frequently. Um, but when it happens, also like when you're concerned about the risk of bias, you can also pick on few studies randomly. Like let's say there are like 15, just pick on few and evaluate the risk of bias assessment. And if you find like on multiple, just on that random selected sample that there are issues, you know that you have to redo it. Again, that goes back like, oh, we have to do more work.
Right, other questions?
But very good question.
I have a related question to that. So if nobody else comes up, I'm watching the chat here, but so you're the chair now of the AGA Guidance Committee, and sometimes what comes up is updating, right? So let's say somebody sends you say, well, there's a new study, and so there has been sort of the argument made that you already did your systematic review, have your point estimates. Now you have to make a decision. Should you reopen this whole thing, add it to it, and how do you make a decision whether you need to update it versus not updating it because it may or may not have a material impact on the point estimate, that new study that was found?
So I would say if I know it will have an impact, I will definitely, for example, we've had this issue actually twice recently where and we became aware of a new study that is getting published that is going to have an impact. And what we did, we actually delayed our guideline for it. Optimally, you would redo the search even. The good part about this is at least in my practice, usually what I do is I update the search periodically throughout the process. Um, and even if you don't do that, the number of new hits with like, if you finish your guideline in a timely manner, the number of new hits is so small that it's very manageable to add an extra study usually, um, without like adding too much effort. Because usually
I
that's
think, best practice is that we shouldn't, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if some of our panel members gives us a new study that just came out, right? Then oftentimes they're more aware of it than we are because they're sort of living in that space. Then we probably need to look at the date that was added to PubMed and actually technically do that search up till that date. So otherwise,
yeah,
it becomes a little bit problematic that we could be cherry picking, right?
I know. Yeah.
That
Like,
new study
this
because
scenario.
maybe there's another completely negative study came out 1 week before that. Then we don't include that
Oh,
one.
it's a slippery slope, right? I think, there
Yeah,
were other guidelines that we became aware, but we said no, we've ended this. But there were recently like major try
sure.
change things. You have to make adjustments. Because otherwise, your guideline is out of date
Oh yeah,
or it gets published.
yeah. But it tends to be that those studies that show the effect tends to be more publicly available or discussed than maybe a concurrent other study that did not show an effect. And
True. Very
want
true.
to make sure that we preserve our systematic approach to the development, I would say. All
Right.
right, other questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more if anyone has any.
Thank you, Madeline, for putting the link in. Maybe if we could put the other one for systematic review, that would be nice too.
Yeah.
This was a great summary. Thank you so much, Perry and Osama. This is always great to see folks who are deep in the trenches, what they do, and that it is okay to sometimes do something a little bit differently, but think it through and making sure that we really um, can provide methodologically high quality systematic reviews that underpins our guideline development because um, you know it's really important that we create that trustworthy document. And I think the systematic review portion is really the core element of that trust building exercise with our frontline clinicians. So thanks again. Any other last minute questions? I'll let you wrap it up, Madeline.
All right. Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining. We hope to see you at future webinars and possibly even future workshops of ours coming up in the next few months. Thanks so much and hope you all have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Good week.